Hi, and welcome to part one. Okay, so let's take a look now at the different types of denim fabric that we can use for this project. The important thing to note is that when you're sewing at doll scale, you might choose a lighter weight denim or a fabric that's not actually denim at all, but just has a denim look, something more along the lines of a woven cotton chambray or a lighter weight twill. It will still give you the finished look that you're looking for, but it'll look more authentic because it can scrunch around the doll's elbows and her arms can move easily, as opposed to a thicker weight denim that you would actually use on a denim jacket for yourself. Now you can also use regular denim. Upcycling denim is a great way to find authentic looking denim that's already worn in. So there's a lot of ways to do that. You can have outgrown jeans from your kids, from your husband, from yourself, or you can pick up stuff at garage sales, Goodwill, thrift stores, anything like that, and come across some really nice pieces of denim in a variety of colors and washes. Another great idea is if you find denim that has some sort of embellishment on it or embroidery, and you can cut your pieces strategically with that placed in a way that's going to look really great on your finished item. There are a lot of other supplies and resources you're going to want to have to do this jacket, so let's take a closer look at all of those. Okay, so in front of me right here I have everything you need and some extra stuff to make the denim jacket. The pattern is printed out. This is the 18-inch size. And I have the pieces here not cut out yet because I specifically wanted to point out the difference between the cut lines for the flat felled seam and the cut line for the faux felled seam. So on those pattern pieces, you will notice the blue line is for 1/4 inch seam allowances that are sewn traditionally right sides together, trim the seam allowance, and zigzag or serge to finish, and those seam allowances will be exposed. Now if you want to do the flat felled seam, which is more traditionally used on denim fabrics, it's used on jeans, it's used on a denim jacket, it encloses the seam so you have no raw edges on the interior of the jacket. So to do this, we've designed this pattern to have a 3/8 inch seam allowance, so it's a little bit easier to actually do the folding for that seam allowance. So be sure to check the video for the difference between the two seam styles. Go ahead and practice on scrap fabric and then really determine which method you're the most comfortable with before you cut out your pattern. Now, the other things that we're going to want to have on hand besides fabric are snaps, buttons, little rivets, or even tinier little rivets, and these little tiny ones I actually found in the scrapbook section. So these are very tiny. You can see them here, 1/16 of a diameter to make these little tiny rivets. So you'll have to have the proper tool to set those in. You would punch a tiny hole in your fabric and then use a setting tool to get that to roll over the back side of the fabric, and it would secure that rivet down into the denim. So something like this can work really well on the jacket. It also works well on a pair of jeans around your back pockets or your front pockets. So this is a cute one. The brand on this is Metal Elements. You can look these up online. You can see that I bought these at Ben Franklin, but I think you would be able to find these at a variety of craft store. Now this one right here is a little bit larger. It has a longer shank or center section there, and then it has a back portion that connects on the back side. I've seen these in a pearlized white color, as well as this blue color. I got these at Hobby Lobby. This brand is a little bit more common, so you could probably find this online or at a variety of craft stores. And then you'll want to go ahead and follow the instructions and practice with this to determine if this is something that you're going to want to use. But something of this size could work very well to replace the buttons along the front. So you could have these placed in along the spots that you have marked, and then you would set those with the proper tool to have that appear as pearlized buttons on the front, and that would look really, really cute. The buttons that we've used are just 1/4 inch buttons. They're easy to sew on by hand. You can use a standard hand sewing needle, and they go on really well. So that's what we've used on this jacket and a variety of the other jackets. You can use colored buttons. You can find them online easily. Home Sew is a great place to find these. They have a lot of colors and mixed variety packages as well. Another option to replace buttons or rivets are just iron-on stones or gems. So these are little tiny ones. You would set them on. You could either cut out a strip and set them apart from each other at the distance you want and then iron them all on at once, or you could use tweezers and carefully place them where you want and then carefully heat set them down to replace the buttons on your jacket. Now this is something that you'd probably want to do if this was for an adult collector, somebody who wasn't going to play with the item all the time, because these would be more likely to fall off. I think if it was played with rather roughly, if it was dressed off and on frequently, you might want to go with something that's secured or hand sewn down. Now, something that I always have on hand, almost for every project, but specifically for this, would be 1/4 inch or 1/8 inch double stick sewing tape. So this is Wonder Tape. This one is quilter's tape. They peel off. They're sticky on both sides. You can sew through and around these. You can remove them. After you sew, you can leave them in because it's stall clothes, and it honestly doesn't really matter if they stay in the fabric. So these are great to have on hand. It's perfect for keeping your 1/4 inch folded under hems or seam lines even, because it is a 1/4 inch width. The 1/8 of an inch is nice to actually hold down a button or something small in place as you're trying to set that down to sew it. Thread is important, and for denim you can use a variety of thicknesses of thread, but with blue denim, this is traditionally the color that you'll see. It's kind of a rust colored thread. This is a thicker thread, and if you're going to use a denim thread like this, then you're going to want to make sure that you have a needle that is large enough for this to be threaded through the eye of the needle. Frequently, I will just buy thread that is a similar color. This is a little bit brighter than this, but in general, I will look for something that's this color, but is still just my normal weight sewing thread. It's easier to sew with at this scale. It doesn't get stuck in the needle, and I find that it works well for the project. You can also do a triple stitch, which actually goes back and forth to create a very vibrant stitch line, which is helpful when you're doing the lighter weight thread. Another reason for using the thinner regular weight thread is so that I can use my twin needle. So I like to use the 1.6 millimeter twin needle. The needle itself then is very close together, so that creates a very nice consistent double stitch line that's just this 1.6 millimeters apart from each other, and then the eye on this needle is standard, so it works well with my standard thread. Now, I don't use this all the time. It depends on the project that I'm working on. Sometimes it's really a big hassle to have to keep switching back and forth your presser feet or your needle and try to get your project done. So a lot of times I just freehand my stitch line, and then if I'm going to do something like that, I can use something like this 1/4 inch design tape or even any type of washi tape. And this is just a lightweight tape that is easy to stick down. It's removable, it doesn't leave a residue, and I can place that on my fabric and use that as a guide for my stitch line. So that comes in handy when you are working on little pieces like these little tabs. You can see here that this one kind of went a little bit crooked because I was trying to feed that through and it caught too close to the side, and then I was trying to correct it. So on a piece this small, it's really obvious that that's not straight. So in this case, I set it aside and I created a new one. But if I wanted to try to have a very nice, consistent, straight edge line, I have a couple options. I can use this tape to run a line, and then I can stitch right along that line, or I can switch out to my edge stitch foot. And this one is great because it has this metal piece right here that sticks out in front of the foot. So as your needle is going down behind it, you can use this metal line as your guide. So you can either run that right along the edge of your fabric and it stitches right next to it depending on your needle position, or you can have your needle positioned exactly directly behind this metal bar, and then as you move along, it's stitching just exactly lined up with where you have that visible to the front of you as you're sewing. If you don't have an edge stitch foot, my standard presser foot is solid metal, so it makes it very hard to see through that middle section when I'm getting close to the points where I will need to pivot my corners. So as I mentioned on this little tab, that can be very tricky if that is the point at which I'm trying to turn and I can't actually see anything. I can raise the presser foot and look underneath to try to determine if I'm at the right point. But that can make it very hard to have a consistent and even stitch line as I'm turning corners. So if you're able to get a clear or an open presser foot, that will make that a lot easier. So the two options that I recommend for doing all of your top stitching, especially around the corners, would be either the edge stitch foot or an open or clear plastic foot. And of course, needles. You will just want to determine which needle you're going to want to use because of the thread that you've picked and the fabric that you've picked. If you've picked a heavier weight denim, you might want to install a jeans needle, which is a larger needle, or you can just use a standard universal needle if you're using a lighter weight denim. And of course, a marking tool is a must. There's a lot of little intricate details on this jacket, so marking points where you're going to want to pivot your corners, marking for the buttons, all of that. You're definitely going to want some sort of marking tool that either will be covered by your thread or is removable either with an iron or to wash out. So those are all the supplies needed to begin working on the jacket. So I encourage you to go gather the supplies that you need, and then of course everybody needs a good reason to do some shopping. So if you need to go pick up a few things before we get started, I would encourage you to do that and then circle back to start to sew along and we can work on the jacket together.